Man, everybody keeps telling me that it's time for the Brooklyn Nets to go into panic mode. Guys, chill. We're not there yet. Saying the Brooklyn Nets should be in panic mode would insinuate that the Brooklyn Nets are a version of themselves that we would see in the playoffs that could possibly lose to another team, right? That's what we would insinuate the Brooklyn Nets being in panic mode being. But the problem is, none of us had this panic mode talk when James Harden was playing and the Brooklyn Nets were winning games pretty handily, might I say. And that's why I feel like we're in this weird space as NBA fans where people are so quick to react to things. Now, I will say, if you're worrying about the Brooklyn Nets without James Harden, then you have a case. Because since James Harden went out April 1st with his hamstring injury, the Brooklyn Nets with both Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant in the lineup are 5-5. So they're a 500 team. And of course, that's not impressive by any means. When you hear that statistic, you're like, wow, you would think a team led by those two guys would at least be able to win more than 50% of the games they play since April 1st when James Harden went out. But the thing is, the difference between the Brooklyn Nets now and before they got James Harden on January 16th is that team that they had before January 16th, where they were playing without Harden and they were a more well-rounded team where you had guys like Spencer Dinwiddie before he got hurt. You had Jared Allen on the team. You had Karis LeVert. You had a deeper team overall. So in terms of contributions from other players, you were getting that on a consistent basis to back up the scoring of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And in that same sense, your defense was more improved as well because you had Jared Allen as that backline of defense. But now when you take all those guys out of the equation and you're also taking James Harden out of the equation, and James Harden being the guy that you count on for offensive, he's your point guard. You're counting on him to get all the other players involved. You're counting on James Harden to be the one to really officiate the offense and get guys like Joe Harris and so on good looks and good shots, as well as Blake Griffin and the others. And so when we look at the stats of the Nets since Harden's first game, from Harden's first game up until his point of where he got injured with the Brooklyn Nets, they were 26-9 with Harden through that stretch from January 16th to Harden's injury. They were averaging 119.3 points per game, shooting 49.7% from the field, 39% from deep, and they were playing pretty well. Now, when you look at their numbers in comparison to when Harden is out, and from the standpoint of after he got his injury, then you see that, not even just saying the games that you have Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant playing, but from that juncture, you see they are 11-9. You see their winning percentage changes drastically, and obviously it will, because your winning percentage will naturally be affected when a guy as great as James Harden goes out of the lineup. But the crazy thing is, and I think this is what's catching a lot of people off guard, is that, yeah, even though you're missing James Harden now, you're going to take a step back. But when you now insert a guy like Kevin Durant, you would expect the wins to really upscale in a way. You would expect that, especially when he's playing with Kyrie Irving. But when you're seeing that they're pretty much just a 500 team with those two since his injury is pretty weird. And I guess that's the jarring part of it all. And that's where a lot of people are hitting the panic button. But the reason why I would tell people to chill and digress and relax in a sense is because of the fact that, look, this version of the Nets isn't the version that people are picking to get to the finals. That's not the version that we're all expecting to go and meet whatever team coming out of the Western Conferences. The version we're expecting of the Nets is a fully healthy Brooklyn Nets team with all the big three in tow and with all those guys able to go at full strength. So when we're starting to talk about hitting the panic mode, I understand hitting the panic mode if maybe we're talking about James Harden isn't going to be able to play in the postseason. If you're talking about something like that and his hamstring injury ends up becoming re-aggravated or something of that sort. But he even said himself he's targeting coming back within the next week or so. When you're talking about the games that we're looking at for the Brooklyn Nets coming up, when you're looking at some of their games coming up, you see games like Chicago, you see games like San Antonio and so on. And when you have those games slated to come up, those aren't necessarily the teams that are game breakers that are going to really push them to the limit. in a sense. So you can see how they're able to squeak out those last few games and hopefully prepare to go on a postseason run once James Harden comes back, because we're really coming to a wrap of the regular season here, and maybe you bring him back for one of the last few games just to get his wheels going. But I don't really see this being the team that they're going to be putting out in the postseason. Now, if this is the version of the team that they are going to be having suit up without James Harden, now I understand talking about hitting the panic button in that sense, because when you're talking about the guys and how it affects the rest of the players, because even Kyrie and Kevin Durant are always going to be able to score. They're always going to be able to get buckets. They're so talented. Those guys aren't going to struggle to get their own shots. But when we're talking about the other guys, like the Joe Harrises, the Jeff Greens, and Landry Shamits, the Blake Griffins, those guys, they need what James Harden was bringing on a consistent basis to be able to perform at a higher level. Like when you look at the guys, like even Kyrie Irving was shooting more efficiently when James Harden was in the lineup. Like, let's look at these numbers. You see Kevin Durant scoring numbers. You see Kyrie Irving scoring numbers. And you see the difference in terms of Kevin Durant is the only guy that you can see his efficiency has still been up. And I mean, that's just because Kevin Durant is just a freak in terms of scoring, and he doesn't really need anybody to help him get an easy shot because he can create that for himself. It's all about if he's hitting the shot, essentially. But a guy like Kyrie Irving, he benefited from James Harden's passing, James Harden creating, and Kyrie Irving be able to spot up and hit those shots. When you look at the shooting statistics for Joe Harris with James Harden in the lineup, I mean, Joe Harris, he was going crazy. His efficiency that he had, he was shooting nearly 51% from the field when James Harden was on the court and making those passes to him. And from deep, he was shooting on 7 3-point attempts per game. He was shooting 48.6% from deep. Like, that's crazy, staggering efficiency, man. I mean, when you look at that difference in contrast to now when James Harden is out of the lineup, not that Joe Harris by any stretch is now shooting bad, but when you look at the contrast from when James Harden is out of the lineup, Joe Harris now shooting nearly 49% instead of where he was at above 50% before from the field, now down to 44% from three, and he's shooting less threes as well at 5.7%. And even Kyrie Irving, his efficiency, Kyrie Irving without James Harden, he's shooting 47.8% from the field, attempting 20 shots per game, and his 3-point attempts, 7 attempts per game, and he's shooting 38% from three. So you see that contrast in comparison to now, let's look at it with James Harden. So with James Harden, Kyrie's taking 21.1 shots per game, shooting 52.2% from the field, and he's shooting 39% from deep. So you get that idea of how that difference looks for a lot of their core contributors, because Joe Harris is a key guy on the court that makes sure that they are being spread out and that the defense can't help on any of those guys' drives or any of the actions and so on. So when you have those other role players engaged and you have a guy like James Harden, who is the point guard of that team that gets everybody involved, that is a key factor of this team, because this team is built on the fact that they're going to outscore other teams. They're not built on their defense, but even whatever semblance of defense they have from time to time, it's because of the fact that these guys are engaged offensively. If people aren't getting shots, or they're not hitting their shots and not feeling like they're being involved, they're not getting the looks that they're consistently looking for and they're used to, then they sometimes get disengaged on defense. So that's what happens with defensive lapses or stuff of that sort. And James Harden, normally he always had guys in the right spots. He would get guys their looks in the right moments and get them more efficient looks. So guys are hitting their shots and they're feeling better about themselves. So you're going to play better defense. It's not that hard to understand about it all, honestly. And when you look at guys like a Kevin Durant and a Kyrie Irving, sort of like what I said earlier, they're so individually talented that they can score on their own, no problem. Kyrie Irving, even when I showed the difference between Kyrie's efficiency versus with James, without James, Kyrie's still crazy efficient. And same thing with Kevin Durant. They're both just scorers, honestly. They both are just going to be able to get the buckets that they want to get. But when you're talking about with James Harden, those guys don't necessarily get other guys involved to the level that James Harden does. James Harden is able to get those guys involved, and he also is able to keep that balance of when to score, when to pass. Sometimes you'll see Kyrie loses the balance at times. Like Kyrie, he can shake anybody on a basketball court, but sometimes it feels as though Kyrie goes into that hole of trying to shake everybody on the basketball court, and he starts taking, Kyrie might haven't noticed it, but he's taking like 4 to 5 shots in a row without really getting other guys involved of that sort. And not to similar effect with Kevin Durant, but Kevin Durant's just not a guy that's going to be dishing the ball around to get other people involved, if that makes sense. So it's imperative that James Harden, that's the version of this Nets team with James Harden that you see in the postseason. That's the version that everybody is saying, hey, that's the team that can threaten whatever team comes out of the Western Conference and possibly win the championship. It's not a version without James Harden. Whatever iteration of this we're seeing is with James Harden. Now, when we look at the Eastern Conference standings for the Nets and what their outlook is looking like, they're sitting 3 games back of Philly right now. It's unlikely they're going to catch Philly for the first seed, but the real reason why I guess people might have a little bit of a sense of panic is the fact that the Milwaukee Bucks are right on their heels for the 3rd seed, as they're only a game and a half back from the Brooklyn Nets. So when it's that close, and then now your playoff seeding changes who you can be playing in the first round and then who you can play in the second round, that does matter. So the next few games for these two teams is going to really have some real playoff implications. So I guess that's where we really talk about how things are going to go moving forward. But guys, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Do you think the Brooklyn Nets should be ready to hit the panic button? Leave all your thoughts down below. Of course, if you didn't subscribe at the beginning of the video, make sure you guys hit the subscribe button, and make sure you guys hit the post notification bell so you don't miss any future videos, as well as leave a like on this video if you enjoyed this kind of content. And of course, guys, make sure you share this video with a friend. It's always appreciated. I'm going to try to drop more of these videos more frequently, just recording a video, just not even something that's more so, it's scripted to a degree, but not to the degree that my other videos can be scripted towards, just so I can try to upload more videos for you guys. I'm trying to, hopefully this week we get multiple uploads, just because I didn't hold you guys down last week. That's my bad, guys. I'm sorry about that. But guys, appreciate you for tuning in, and until next time, guys, I'm out.